What is up, family? It is another episode on the Ivan Herrera Show. And I'm so excited because we have a special episode with the NFL draft in just a couple days. This Thursday, I have a special guest, and we are going to dive into some draft strategies to prepare you for your upcoming rookie drafts. We're also going to go over the actual rookie draft itself, like what we see coming up, certain prospects. But before we go any further, let me be a good host and welcome my good friend, Mr. Cole Crockett. What's up, man?
All right. Hey, thank you, Ivan. Appreciate it. 2 sleeps, right? 2 sleeps away from the NFL draft. So I'm excited.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way of seeing it. 2 sleeps away. And just to give you guys some background on who Cole is, number one, he is a new father. So he just had the honor of becoming a dad. He is now officially in the dad gang. How's the whole new routine going, man?
Man, I've been explaining it like this. It's just amazing how hard it can be to complete one task in a day. You know, it's just it's amazing. You just have one thing on the to-do list aside from, feed baby, clean baby, sleep baby, and then it's just like one personal thing, and it's 4:45, and you're like, how have I still not gotten this one thing done yet? But it's a lot of fun. Just lean into it and enjoy it, right? I mean, that's all you can do.
That's so awesome. Yeah. So me and Cole actually are a part of the same church community. So we've been going there together now for a little bit, almost 2 years, but Cole's been there for a cool minute. And so it's been cool to see you now transition from being a husband to now a father, and it's only going to get better. And actually what's funny, me and Cole knew of each other, but I think last year our relationship as friends blossomed when me and him saw each other at the Fantasy Footballers live show in Los Angeles, the most random way possible, but that ignited a huge oh my gosh, dude, you're as crazy as I am about this stuff. But not that there's ever like a competition, but Cole is a whole different level. Now, Cole, correct me if I'm wrong here. You were in 21, 23 best ball leagues last year, or 21 total leagues in general, right?
Man, best ball leagues, I'm in way more than that. So let's not talk about those numbers. I've already done probably 70 best ball drafts already this year.
So wow.
I mean, so the NFL draft hasn't even started yet. So, but yeah, I think, usually around 23 to 25 fantasy leagues, but trying to have less redraft leagues and just have more dynasty leagues. Because don't stop. So that's where it's at.
Yeah, I've been getting into this will be now I'm entering my third season in Dynasty, and I absolutely love it. The first few seasons, especially if you only played redraft, it's kind of an adjustment because you don't know how to really strategize because it's a whole different ball game. But once you start getting picks involved, and once you start getting a good gauge of your team and it's how it's constructed, it really makes a huge difference and also it helps when it helps when the leagues are also engaging, because then you have guys that are negotiating all season long. And even right now, this is my second off season, and it's been so much fun. Like, I've sent you a whole bunch of different trade proposals and everything like that. Right. So as you can see, guys, this is why I brought Cole. Cole has so much passion, so much knowledge, and above anything else, too, I didn't really tell this to Cole, but at the very end, we're going to give an inspiring message, something that we can just give as a nugget to all you dads out there, because this demographic really is targeted to all you guys that are husbands, fathers, guys that are looking to figure it all out, and me and Cole can attest that we're trying to figure it out ourselves. But the cool thing about us being believers, we believe that we have an underlying hope that can help guide us, so we'll give you guys a little nugget, kind of curveball off the cuff. And Cole can even tell you, I didn't even tell him, to prepare for anything like that too.
Not at all. But I mean, it's exciting, right? I mean, we're all just trying to do life together. And like you said, part of the same church community, which is the main thing of my life and yours as well. But, being able to also, we're just normal guys, and just love football, love fantasy football, get to geek out on all that stuff. So it's just, it's all part of it. So I look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, cool. If you don't mind, how about you just give a really brief introduction as to how you got into fantasy football and how that's evolved now that you're in so many different leagues?
Man, you asked my inception story on anything else, and I could probably tell you exactly when it started. But man, fantasy football, I feel like it's just always been a part of growing up. I mean, I just remember doing fantasy leagues with my dad, or ESPN free leagues for so long. So just been obsessed with football since I was little. Funny little anecdote, or I guess funny little story, but they recorded, I was telling kind of what my first words were to my son, your mother's a warrior. I love you very much. Like that sort of thing. My dad was like, way to make me look bad. my first words to you were, I'll make you as good of an athlete as you want to be. So sports was a huge part of my life from a very early age. So
Right.
I've always been part of it.
And your background, you're from Seattle, so diehard Seahawks fan. I mean, where are you at now with this team? What are some of your things that you're looking forward to? Some things that you would love to do if you were the GM this Thursday? What would you be approaching as a Seattle Seahawks fan?
Man, I mean, I think first of all, as big of a diehard Seahawks fan as I am and was, I did not see this Russell Wilson demise. I mean, I was so far thrown off on all of that. When we made that trade, I was like, all right, well, there goes the franchise. And now it's just funny that it's arguably the worst trade, or best trade if you're me, best trade in football history. So pretty interesting stuff. And, where the team's at, I mean, we're not really in a position to do what I think is best. We just need to get offensive linemen and just shore up what's, the offensive tackle locate, and then defensive edge or something like that. I mean, there's some pass rushers and some tackles, right around where we pick that we should be able to get. I would love to get in there, of course, and get one of these top 3 or 4 quarterbacks. I'm sure we'll get into that stuff, but I feel like the quarterback position's kind of loaded this year, and both at the top, but also I think some of these other guys, Bo Nix in the right system could be good. I mean, we watched what Michael Penix did as a pure pocket passer, but then goes out there and runs, the 40 time and whatever he ran it in that impressed everybody. So might be more tools to that game. Right. And then it's JJ McCarthy hype that's just gotten insane. I mean, goes from basically not even a first round talent or draft grade up to, Will Washington take him at number 2 or are the Patriots going to mess up their draft? How are they going to do it? Does it involve JJ McCarthy? We know they're going to mess up their draft if history, if history's in the indication, but we'll see on all that. So I think quarterback position, and that's the NFL. I mean, we're not talking fantasy here, of course, but I guess in super flex leagues also, but just getting a piece of one of these quarterbacks would be nice.
Absolutely. So then now, as we're going to segue into the fantasy football aspect, I am so excited because you and me spoke last week about actually, just collaborating together. And this is what has led to us now wanting to go over what's going to be going down this coming Thursday. So we have a special episode called the Fantasy Rookie Advice Show. And basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to ask Cole a series of questions. We're going to have a dialogue back and forth about each subject matter that I ask him, just so that way you guys can get two different perspectives. And I will submit right now that Cole is the far more advanced college prospect individual. He knows so much about these upcoming guys. I'm barely getting my feet wet into this world, but Cole is thankfully deeper in this than I am. So then we'll get into a fun little back and forth with some questions, and then we'll, of course, give some advice as well. So with that, Cole, I remember when we spoke about this a few weeks ago, you were so adamant about how these wide receivers that we have are like any other class that we've had in, just quite some time. And a lot of it was around the depth, about how there's so many guys that can make a difference right away. And with that, when we're talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, are all these guys classified, in your opinion, as, just difference makers as soon as they get into the league? Or how do you project their careers and how that will also translate into fantasy football?
Yeah, well, and that's a great question. And one thing that we've been talking about on how we do dynasty leagues now, and one thing that I've found I've adapted to is a much more heavily wide receiver, in draft, in rookie draft approach. I think running backs are highly coveted, and that's really, everyone knows that's what you need to win fantasy leagues. But with the turnover and what the NFL does and the lack of real bell cow backs anymore, you can get a Zach Moss off waivers when when Jonathan Taylor's out and you can run it with that. So I've really gone more wide receivers. Not that I'm gearing only after wide receivers, but I'm looking at these picks and I'm not trying to jam in running backs like most of my competition is. I think, to answer your question, the top 3 wide receivers in this, I put it down as, it's a home run, a slam dunk, and a Gronk spike. It's all 3. These 3 prospects, no prospects can't miss, but Marvin Harrison's going to be as close to a can't miss prospect as there is, and the fact that there's even, in any conversation. So you take that as the bar, right? And it's Marvin Harrison Jr. He's got the genetics, he's got, the pro football dad. That's just, he grew up around it. And then he comes out after putting up like 1,500 yards in back-to-back seasons or whatever it was. And then he's not the consensus number one. I mean, that right there tells you something. Okay, well, who's in competition with them? Okay, well, Malik Neighbors is awesome. But then, Daniel Jeremiah or Matt Harmon, these other guys are also like, dude, Rome Odunze over Malik Neighbors. And then, I listened to Matt Harmon just agonize over the Rome Odunze versus Marvin Harrison, who to put at number one. And I guess that just really just cemented it in my mind that, all three of these, I have the 101, 102, 103 in some dynasty leagues.
Wow.
And I'm just excited for any three of them. I think they're all three going to come in and contribute right away. I think for sure Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze are going to be pro ready right away. I mean, the Malik Neighbors thing is going to be great if you can get that Justin Jefferson treatment. That was the whole thing on Justin Jefferson coming out, was like, how much time was he in the slot? And, with Malik Neighbors, I think his slot rate was like 57% or something, which was higher than which was lower than Justin Jefferson's. But at the same time, I mean, it's the same conversation. So moving him around and getting him into like a hybrid, kind of like what they did with CeeDee Lamb this year, that stuff takes a little bit of time when you're, he's not necessarily all routes. He's a yak guy. So I think Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze are going to come out firing right away, and I think Malik Neighbors is right there on their heels as well.
Right,
moving forward.
Yeah, and that was also what I've been seeing a lot. And I remember the hype around Rome Odunze wasn't. I know that you know this better than I do, but Matt Harmon has this great piece called Reception Perception. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Rome Odunze was one of the first few wide receivers in a few seasons where his entire route tree was all green. So that just really speaks to how talented this kid is. And I know that he's a Washington guy. Do you root for Washington as well? Are you a big fan of that too?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
And then I know that
it's just cool seeing Rome Odunze. Like, you can see as much, and this is the hard part about like engaging talent. You can see Rome Odunze and all the prospects. You can see their workout measurables. You can see their college production. What you can't see is him knowing he could get a better time in the 3-cone or whatever it is, and just sitting out there during the combine and just working still. I mean, that's something that just can't be taught, and that should give you just tons of confidence knowing that not only does he have the talent, but he's going to put in the work ethic. And, we could be adding more to that than is actually there. But it gives you, when you have a lot of people that you're concerned about on off-field character issues and that sort of thing, will that affect my draft pick moving forward? Well, I don't think you're going to have that issue with Rome Odunze.
Right. So then now we've established that those first three wide receivers, those guys that you feel so comfortable with coming out of your draft, would you say the range for those guys, if you're in a startup draft right now, when we'll just throw Superflex in there so that way we can get the quarterbacks involved, would you say 1 through 6, picks 1 through 6, those are established for those three guys to be there for sure? Or is it like Marvin Harrison's in there and then you have the other two guys maybe outside of that? How would you gauge them within that first round of any kind of fantasy rookie draft?
Yeah, I think Marvin Harrison will be in there, but I think Malik Neighbors and Odunze will be just, I think they'll be outside of the top 6, but I don't think too far, especially Neighbors. I think he's going to be right on the heels. But you also have to keep in mind, I mean, like you said, I mean, there's people in dynasty drafts with all different levels of history and how much experience they have. Rookies are just, and I love doing drafts now, dynasty drafts now, startup drafts, because they're undervalued. I mean, so I think Malik Neighbors should be in there. I think Rome Odunze should be right up there, all top 10. But I don't know if necessarily everyone was caught on to that yet. People want to watch landing spots, and we'll get into that about dominating your draft and how much weight we should actually put into landing spot versus talent. And that will differ based on position. But with wide receiver, you want to stay with talent, and the talent will win out.
Right. So with these pass catchers, also seeing a tight end emerge, and that's Brock Bowers. And you really don't hear anyone else. And I feel like last year's tight end class was a little bit deeper as far as the hype went. So going into how you analyze a pass catcher like Brock Bowers, how do you go about ranking a tight end that is as talented as him with these pass catchers that we have within this draft?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to go to what are your thoughts on how you optimize your rookie drafts? I mean, you got to look at it like this. I mean, wide receivers are going to play, longer and at a higher level generally than the tight end position. And that's one area again that I've kind of grown. I mean, I remember I took Kyle Pitts over Jamar Chase, right? I mean, and in a rookie draft, and that was a couple of years ago, and I look back at that now in the way that I operate, and I would never do that now. And it's just, as you learn. And so I think as far as production, as far as, if you're in a redraft league or a tight end premium, I think Brock Bowers is going to be probably more productive than in year one. And it's tough for a tight end to be productive in year one, but he's not blocking. He's just catching footballs. He's a wide receiver, kind of like almost like to a more degree than even Dalton Kincaid. Same kind of thing there, but except there hasn't been a prospect like Brock Bowers in quite some time. So I think production wise, I think he's going to produce more. But I mean, as far as someone that can actually propel your fantasy team, you might want to look at a Brian Thomas Jr. or maybe Adonai Mitchell to a lesser extent. But it's going to be hard to click. I mean, it's going to be really hard to click one of those names over Brock Bowers when the time comes in your rookie draft. So I'm thinking about the same thing.
So yeah, and I think one thing to even analyze when we're giving advice, it's so hard to just give it as hey, this is an overarching thing that you should do, because every single team is going to be very circumstantial based on how their team is constructed, where some of the gaping holes. And with that said, though, do you draft, is it based off need or is it based off talent? Because you kind of alluded, and it sounds like when you drafted Kyle Pitts over Jamar Chase, was it because of just a lack of depth at the position that you had, or is it more so I think he's going to be more talented than Chase?
That was actually a league setting thing. So I would say even more than if I'm going to be drafting off of team specific, it's not going to be really my team's needs most of the time. It might be league scoring, and in this league, it was like one running back, one wide receiver, and then two flex could be either way. So your tight end was one of your 5 skill position players, right? And so it just made it without it being a tight end premium, it still boosted the level of tight end necessity. And I go back on that because I should have never done that. And so when I'm drafting, I'm drafting off of skill now, and especially in like in my rookie drafts. It's going to mostly just be talent and skill. And then I'll trade for needs, but you have to know your league, right? I mean, like you said, it's better when you have an engaging league, which means some leagues aren't engaging. In those leagues, you're going to have to draft for your team build, your team needs a little bit more than you are in a league where everyone's talking, everyone's trading. There's trades all season long because you can just, these things can be liquid assets, that you can trade in a league that it will optimize for it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So then let's go ahead and now get into some of the difference makers. We've obviously spoken about the top three wide receivers, which are Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, as well as Rome Odunze. When you're looking now at the remaining class, we'll just say 4 through 10, are there certain players that get you really excited? And this could be either because of potential landing spots or just overall skill that jump at you right now.
Yeah, I have I think Brian Thomas Jr. might be in a different, and this is kind of the one portion I'm weighing through still is Brian Thomas Jr. in his own tier? And that's going to be a draft question, and I don't really have that same question for Adonai Mitchell, although it's the same thing. Like those guys could go back to back in the draft. I mean, those guys are, maybe Adonai Mitchell by the time draft time comes, he flips Brian Thomas Jr. But, depending on what happens there, I mean, my next tier is 4 through 9. So I have the next few guys I really like. I think Brian Thomas Jr. and Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey are all in the same tier. And then the one that I think that is in the tier below as far as consensus that I have right in that same tier is pretty Ricky Pearsall, man. Ricky Pearsall is the one that I think is kind of underrated and I think belongs in that tier. And I don't think anyone else has him in their top 10.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't heard that name as frequently. I thought that was more of a second round, maybe even mid to third round rookie draft.
He'll still be a second round. He'll still be a second rounder, mid second or whatnot. But I think there's a lot of juice there. And I think it's kind of a well-kept secret a little bit. Kind of like Ladd McConkey, same thing. I mean, where at Georgia, just he had very limited production. But when you go to the NFL, they're looking for different things, and they want to see the route tree, like we talked about, with Rome Odunze. Just see we want to see can you run the route tree? Can you act in a pro style offense? That was the thing with like Jalen Hyatt last year, that, in the Tennessee gimmicky offense. That was the whole thing, and proved to be right? Cedric Tillman, same thing. I mean, those guys didn't do anything. And, but Jalen Hyatt had all that production. So it's, they're looking for different things in the NFL as to college. So I think Troy Franklin has really come down quite a bit from where I was thinking. I mean, the production at Oregon was tremendous. And I think guys like Ladd McConkey and Ricky Pearsall are kind of bridging that gap and are actually may have even exceeded some of the Troy Franklin stuff. And Xavier Worthy, I mean, same thing. I mean, I think, but go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I was going to ask you that. What are some of the guys that have helped you groom what you're looking at as far as skill wise coming out of the draft, things that you've seen that translate well? Because it sounds like you have a wealth of knowledge of things of what are, I guess, high alert for you. Because I'm assuming based off things that have absolutely just burned you. But what are some resources that you have used to just help you fine tune some of the things that you're looking for when it comes to scouting?
Yeah. So it's kind of going back to what we were talking about. It's really different for each position. So, I mean, what I'm looking for at a tight end is nothing similar to what I'm looking for in a wide receiver. Right. And so like they do similar things, right? I mean, they're running out there catching the football, but to me, they don't really coincide what we're looking for at all. I mean, the tight end position is going to be draft capital, but man, athletic, the measurables, the just big athletic tight ends just do well in the NFL. And that's all there is to it. It doesn't necessarily matter the production as much as their athletic score. And so with wide receiver, obviously looking at draft capital, age. I mean, age is a huge thing for wide receivers. You want to be playing at 22 or under the first year. Usually there's going to be 3-year college players, and the whole COVID thing's kind of throwing a wrench in that a little bit. And so just trying to stay fluid, right? That's the other thing, Part of getting better is also realizing what you don't know. So, extra year of COVID, what does that mean? The transfer portal, now you don't have to wait a year. The NIL money, college, they don't need to go to the NFL to make money anymore. So just kind of weighing all those things with the previous preconceived knowledge that you had on what makes a good prospect.
Right. Yeah. And that's what has been so fascinating for me growing in this now new version of just fantasy football that I'm playing. Cause I mean, with Dynasty, it goes so much deeper than just preparing for like a few weeks before your draft. This one is, you have to really be in tune. And I know for me, what's helped me out, I know like for years I've watched Mel Kiper, but you were putting me on JJ Zachariason, and he actually mentioned about how important even breakout age is when it comes to analyzing how a player will well. And he had a really daunting list when it came to guys that didn't have necessarily the best breakout rate when it came to their age, and how like guys that were drafted by like a certain threshold just wouldn't do well if they were drafted in the first round. And when you hear the list that he shared, and I wish I can source it because I don't just have it top of my head, but I thought it was amazing how like I never would have thought that would have been such an intangible thing to really analyze and see how that can actually translate to actual like success in the NFL.
Well, and it makes sense, right? I mean, 17, 18, 19, 21 years old as a young man. I mean, that's when you're testing yourself against the world, right? I mean, that's like so much self-discovery at that time. You're playing high school sports or college sports, whatever it is. And, whenever if you can go in and do that, like Braylon Allen, who we'll talk about, 17 years old at Wisconsin, running back. I mean, he put up, however, huge year one in his college career. Now it leveled off, right? I mean, he could have, if that would have continued to ascend, we would be talking about Braylon Allen. Like we wouldn't have heard that this is a weak running back class, because we'd have a stud, and then we'd have the Trey Bensons, we'd have the Jonathan Brooks, we'd have the 7 others that we could, that are like ancillary portions that could fit in the right set, in the right Blake Corum, like if he goes to Chargers for, and plays for Harbaugh or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of other things there, but that breakout age is very important, but you also need to keep building on it. And that's kind of what happened with Braylon Allen, is he didn't build on that, but he had that elite age.
Got it. And I'm glad that you brought up that, because now that's a perfect segue to my next question. Being that this class has gotten so much talk about, which wide receiver is going to be drafted, which quarterbacks are going to go to what situation, depending on what teams make trades. Are there any running backs, as you preface, this is a kind of a weaker class as it's been classified. Are there any running backs that get your attention, and any backs that you think that could make a huge impact just, here if they get drafted right away? Like what just player gets you excited at the running back position when it comes to the rookie drafts?
Well, and after all this talk about, me wanting to draft wide receivers, mainly wide receivers in my rookie drafts, and that's just for a building of a long-term fantasy, a long-term dynasty team. But the main reason that I got in, I started accumulating 107, 108, 109 in single quarterback leagues. First of all, you can get them relatively inexpensively. They're a mid to back end one, but a couple running backs get drafted in some good spots. And then we have this wide receiver core. I mean, we're going to have good picks all the way to 206 in a single quarterback league. And that's going to be very impressive. So the running backs that I'm, most excited about, I think Jonathan Brooks to me is the most surefire of the production profiles. I mean, he had the ACL tear, which is kind of why his draft stock is going to sink. But as long as he stays in day 2, which is round 2 and 3, it shouldn't really affect his outlook very much. And I think he's going to be the first or second running back taken off the board. So, I mean, I was already intrigued by him knowing that his recovery was coming. But when Trey Benson ran a 4.39 at 215 pounds at the combine, that's when I started making the picks, because I was like, making trades to get that draft pick. Because first of all, we have a deep wide receiver class. So if he doesn't end up in a good landing spot, I'm still going to get one of the top 9 wide receivers. Great. But I might end up in a really elite opportunity if a couple running backs go in. And so when Trey Benson ran, 4.39 at 215 pounds or whatever, I was like, this class could be legit. And then, there's obviously still some other ones. I mean, Blake Corum has been one that people are really like for just like a grinder, a lot of tread on those tires, with as much as he ran the ball for Michigan. But man, Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. I mean, I forget 4.3 something. I think 4.43 or 4.4. I mean, I think he ran one of the fastest times for a running back. Great size, can catch the ball. And then, there's Marshawn Lloyd, who I think that's Daniel Jeremiah's number 1 running back that he has. I mean, it's pretty interesting that some of these running backs could really get going. So I like Trey Benson just due to the size speed combo. I think if he is, he didn't catch many balls in college, but he looks like he can catch footballs. It just wasn't part of what they were doing. But I think he can catch the ball. So we have Jonathan Brooks, we have Trey Benson, and then if just one of, Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, any of those guys catch a good, get picked up in the draft earlier than we were thinking, then, we might have a few different running backs to choose from.
Right. So I did also preface in my last video about how there's certain teams that you want to keep a close eye for because of their positional needs. And I wanted to ask you before I share some of mine, but what 2 teams are you just being very mindful of as far as who they draft and why?
Man, the 2 easy ones, I don't want to steal any of yours. I don't want to put you on the spot. So I'm just going to, I'll say the 2 that neither one of us can choose then, or I guess you can do whatever you want. But I mean, obviously anyone that goes to the Chargers and the Cowboys, right? I mean, because the Chargers have so many needs, but they have Justin Herbert throwing them the ball. They have literally no wide receivers. They have no running back. It's like, that's just a home run if you can go there. Now, the problem is like Jim Harbaugh is just willing to just run Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins more into the ground. His brother's old busted running backs, get him from the recycler and then just do the same thing again. So with that being said, Jim Harbaugh could just do that. But you get one of these running backs into that position, or the first wide receiver. Let's say it goes all 4 quarterbacks to start, and Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to the Chargers at 5. I mean, can you imagine? And so, I mean, Chargers and Cowboys are the for sure home runs. I think the sleeper ones, Giants. I mean, I think I really want to see who the Giants go with. I mean, because They don't have very many wide receivers. I mean, their literal tight end, I think, is waiting until he figures out if the franchise is going to get him a quarterback or not before he decides that he's going to unretire.
Right.
So I think in Devin Singletary as their running back. So I think that's interesting. And then I think super sleeper is Bengals. I think Bengals is interesting because you have two running backs that aren't really expected to do too much in Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Right. And then T. Higgins is gone. Right. I mean, they have to make a play, and whoever they draft, they're going to have to contribute right away because this is their chance before they pay all the money to Chase. And they have some contracts coming up. So T's going to be gone. Boyd's already gone, most likely, as they bring him back cheap. So I think those are some of my sleeper ones that I really like.
Yeah. So you took one of them, which was the Chargers. I was actually looking forward to see, and I thought that the easy one was Dallas because they've done almost no moves whatsoever, especially at the running back position. But the one that I'm keeping very close eyes on is that of the Buffalo Bills, because obviously with them losing Stephon Diggs, you wonder who are they going to pair up there in that offense. And it's not because we don't think that Khalil Shakir isn't good, or maybe even that of Curtis Samuel, but you also know, okay, they need a big alpha male. And we spoke about them potentially making a move by, either using their number one or their first or their second round pick to move up even closer. But I don't see them moving up too much. But this class is so deep where I can imagine the scenario where they get like a Brian Thomas to go along with Josh Allen, and think that'd be a good pairing. Another one too would be like one player that I've seen in a couple mocks, and I want to get your take on this as well. I've seen Troy Franklin attached to the Chiefs in 2 different mock drafts, and thought that could be potentially scary, especially now knowing that we have Rashee Rice potentially missing multiple games this upcoming season. But I think that Troy Franklin would be such a good fit within that offense, considering that he has that speed and he could be that vertical deep threat. And I feel like we've already said this about the Chiefs before with Sky Moore and Mecole Hardman, but I don't know, something about Troy Franklin makes me think it would work out in that scenario.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the thing about the Bills is you're not getting, I don't think you're getting, the problem is I don't think you're getting any of the top 5 receivers at 28, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about with Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas could go to the Jags at 17, and Bengals at 18, Steelers at 20. I mean, there's some teams that could take, Brian Thomas or Adonai Mitchell. And I think those would be great fits for Buffalo. I mean, that would be huge fantasy implications if they can make it there. The good news is that there's just so many wide receivers that are, and so many wide receiver needy teams. The bad news is I'm not sure that, Brian Thomas or Adonai Mitchell get there. So one of the things that I wrote down is a little double tap from Buffalo to where they go their smaller wide receiver first with like a Ladd McConkey, like a Ladd McConkey in even if that's at 28, I mean, that could happen. I mean, he could be a first round wide receiver. He could be right in that range, and then double tap with like a project alpha, like Keon Coleman or Leggett or something like that. I mean, just a big bodied alpha, like you said, to, someone that could be better as that X receiver.
What's crazy, man, as you're talking about that, I was, thinking about, and this is just my Philadelphia Eagle fandom, always being such a hard fan on the team. But I remember when they drafted Jalen Reagor because of needs, and we needed Jalen Reagor to be that speed guy. And then, shortly after, Vikings draft Justin Jefferson. But I always wonder how that'll play out. And it's so exciting, like this part of the draft, because it's the what could be, and that's what I think is so exciting. And yet you always get, just so curious on how it's actually going to pan out. But okay, so now that we've gone over a few prospects that you're really excited about, that you think could be under the radar, that can be successful, what do you think about overall draft rookie strategy? Like when it comes to the draft strategy, when approaching either a startup or just a rookie draft, you kind of mentioned how you keep your eyes on certain intangibles, but let's just say like this: you are in a super flex and you have 2 solid quarterbacks, but you have the number 1 overall pick. Do you trade back knowing that you don't really need Caleb Williams, or what's the right approach in your opinion when it comes to that scenario?
Yeah, I think, if you're going to trade back in a super flex league, I think this is kind of the time to do so. The problem is how far can you really trade back and still get, and still get one of the top, you probably want to, if you traded out of the super flex, out of the 101, you're probably saying, hey, I like Jaden Daniels or Drake May also quite a bit. And so how far can you trade back? 5 maybe? So, I mean, you could go 101 for like 105 and probably another, probably like the 107 or something. I mean, you could probably get a haul. And then, I mean, that would be a great, so that's something I would definitely be interested in. For rookie drafts for me, one thing that I always want to do is, like I said, I oftentimes am drafting for talent, right? At least for wide receiver. For running back, if you want to start getting into opportunity, that can be a slippery slope, as we know. But you kind of know the spots that where people go to and kind of what their archetype and what their outlook is going to be over the next few years. Sure. One thing I would definitely say is, make trades, right? I mean, if I talked to you about some of the trades that I made. If you're studying these things early and it's really easy in this year's draft class, because we're talking about draft skill at wide receiver, draft skill, draft talent. Don't worry about landing spot. Well, if that's the case, then the tiers aren't really changing too much for you, right? And so you can get in just by knowing who's good, where everyone's going to fall, where the tiers are. I came in and traded the 106 and Chase Brown, who I don't think, 5th-year running back in Bengals, in Cincinnati, I don't think he's going to do too much, for the 105, right? And it doesn't seem like that big of a trade, but I mean, now that's big 3 wide receivers, Brian Thomas and Brock Bowers, right? I don't have to worry about that's it. And so I was thrilled to make that trade. And I knew that trade just from being ahead of the curve that could look bad in a few years, who knows? But all you can do is put yourself in a probability to win. So just by knowing some of the players earlier than everybody else, and just sending out draft picks, or sending out trades, and putting yourself in a position to win, because I think it'd surprise most of your listeners if you went back and looked at the hit rates. Let's use a single quarterback league after pick like 14. So like 2.02, people still think, 2.04, 2.06, 2.09, those are still good picks. But if you look at the hit rates on that stuff, and the third round is just based, almost nothing, right? For the most part. And you can obviously pick here and there. I think I got Jaden Reed at like the 3.02 in one of my leagues, but I also had to take him at the 208 in like my higher end league. And still, like, Jaden Reed is someone I'm trying to get rid of, right? Like, that was awesome. He had a great rookie year, but there's a ton of ambiguity in that receiving core. And so the more I play fantasy football, the more I realize that premium picks are all that really matters. So whatever you have to do, if you can take a Jaden Reed, I took Jaden Reed and Zach Moss, right? Someone and traded it for the 1.08 and a 2025 first. And I mean, that trade is going to look, I think that trade is going to look great come this time next year. I mean, Zach Moss, how long can he really be hyper successful in the NFL any longer? And Jaden Reed, I mean, there was a lot of touchdowns on that, a lot of manufactured touches from a coaching core that says, every week it could be somebody else. And, you have Christian Watson still in there, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs. So it's just basically just like looking at your team, not as like a need, but how can I extract value? Like, look at them as liquid assets. And that's kind of the best advice that I could give anybody, I think, is, need is important. You're going to have to address your needs. Don't get me wrong. But in the off season, pre-draft, pre-combine, like start using some of those liquid assets and move up and get some of these premium picks.
Got it. And I'm glad that you said it that way, because I was going to ask you that. When it comes to like just the absolute optimal time frame when it comes to making these trades, when have you seen it is the easiest way to negotiate a trade for a pick, or whether you're trying to trade a player away for picks? What have you seen has been the best time frame? Is it before the actual draft itself? What's been your gauge over the past few years that you've been doing this?
Definitely. So I think the absolute best time is most of the leagues that I play in, top 6 are in reverse order. So they'll end up through 112 through 107 in reverse order how they finish. But then the bottom 6 is a lottery, right? And so it's just randomized from the bottom 6 teams. So the absolute best time is everyone believes they're a competitor. Especially. Let's say your trading ends week 11 or something like that. and you have a team that's 5-5 that you're trading with. They think they're making the playoffs. They think they're one piece away. They think they're one piece away from the championship, and you're getting their next year's firsts at a price that is so low. And then once the season turns over, automatically those picks are worth more right then because they're current picks. And then as the combine happens, people are a little bit interested, but once the time that it really accelerates, the time between the NFL draft and your rookie draft, right in there is the sweet spot to be trading away picks. And by then, like we talked about, you'll know if you're studying this stuff ahead of time, and it's not supposed to be like torturous. This is like an enjoyment, right? Like if you like doing it, get in there a little bit earlier and just learn the prospects a little bit. It's fun anyway. Then you're making moves so far in advance that when everyone's buying those picks, you're already selling the first pick of the next tier, and you're just so far ahead that's how when people look back at trades and they're like, how did this happen? That's how people have, legit teams.
Right. It's funny. Right, dude, and it's so funny that happened to me last year. I remember a guy hit me up, and this was our first year actually in this league together. So it was all brand for all of us. So all of us thought we had solid teams, just to your point. And I remember that he hit me up and he wanted DK Metcalf because I had DK Metcalf and I also had JSN. And he said, hey, man, I'll give you a first rounder. And he gave me a first rounder as well as Kenneth Walker. And he was doing really well. And it's crazy how fantasy can turn everything around. And that's why I'm going to go on a rant here, but I'm so anti-vetoing trade because there's never a guarantee that this is going to be lopsided forever, right? Especially in the context of Dynasty, because this kind of dude ended up going on a 5-game losing streak after that trade. So he was a middle of the pack, top tier player, and he just wet the bed for the rest of the season. So I ended up having the 104. He ended up having the 103. And actually, you know about this trade because then I was able to trade with with that same guy, the 103 that he gave me originally, and my 104, and I turned it around to make it become Amon-Ra St. Brown, Zamir White, and his first rounder for next season. So just to your point, these, if you see them as liquidated assets, that means that even their value can evolve, just absolutely from, 1 year, or rather, I guess from 1 month to the other, considering what actually takes place.
Right. And you find guys like that. I know in my leagues, there's people that I know don't value their draft picks at all. And so I'll get, as soon as you get the next year's draft picks, I'm sending them old busted, someone that has, 2 years left or running back on his, second year of his second contract or something, who's still doing well. But just to your point, now looking back, you got Kenneth Walker and the 1.03, let's call that Rome Odunze. So you got Kenneth Walker and Rome Odunze for DK Metcalf. That's what I'm talking about, is that stuff right there. That's the best time. And then, I'm selling in between what I want to sell. I'm selling in between the draft, the actual NFL draft, and then my rookie draft is kind of the prime time to be selling picks.
Right. So, okay. Now I want to give actually some very simple practical advice for some of our viewers here. If you, Cole, wanted to approach someone in a trade, what are some of your approaches on how you get that conversation going? Because I have some theories about how sending cold offers aren't really the best way. For some guys that may work, but for me, it's been creating, just that conversation organically. But what have you done to kind of get the ball rolling on a trade? So say, for example, Cole, you are in need of a trade and you want to hit up, we'll just say myself, for a trade. How would you send me a message to get the conversation going, to get this trade up and running?
Yeah, if you have access to the person's cell phone number, then I'm hitting them on their personal device, right, where they feel most comfortable, right? The problem is that, like we talked about, and it seems to be an ongoing part of this conversation, is you have to have an engaging league to be able to pull off some of these things. So if ideally, I have someone's cell phone number, so I'm reaching out via text. It would be my number one, or email number two. And then if I don't have either one of those, let's say they're hidden in, I play on Masters Fantasy Football, and let's say they're hidden, then I'll send offers. Basically, I'll just send an offer, but not for an actual trade offer, and just start the conversation there, and just see. And I'll put in I'll send a couple different, one thing you can do is I don't like to ask people for what they want to trade, but what I like to do is I will group 3 players in and ask them are any of these people are you looking to move any of these players? And that way I can find out from them who they've three players that I think are valued similarly, and I can see who they're devaluing, and then I'll just go after that person because I legitimately don't. They're liquid assets. Again, I don't necessarily care until it gets close to the season starting and I'm really solidifying my roster. I don't really care which player it is if I think that they're all about the same. I just want whatever the best value is, and then work something from there.
Oh, that's so smart. Yeah.
The best thing obviously that you can do is if you see a team need, and the easiest way is they have 5 running backs and are stacked, and you're stacked at wide receiver, and it's just something like that,
right?
Where you've done the research and you've seen it. That's the most organic way of doing it.
Right. Okay, cool. So now that we're just landing the plane when it comes to, just draft strategy, everything like that, what is your overall outlook for this upcoming rookie, just class that you see right now compared to the one that we got to this, this past year? If you had to just, I guess, define it in a few words of how elite you think this class is or is not, how would you put a term on this actual draft class?
Yeah, I think this draft class, I think it's very top heavy. But I also think that it's deep. So I know that those two things kind of are counterintuitive in a way, but the top 3 wide receivers are just so good. And you're getting 10 years out of these guys almost. It's pretty incredible the shelf life of a wide receiver. But so I think, and again, the NFL draft is going to be a huge determining factor in this, because if we see 4 day 2 running backs, we're in business, baby. And then I think this goes from a really solid class to a great class, because the only thing this class is missing is some real running back power. And if you end up getting that, then we're going to be looking at this class. And there's a ton of need in the NFL. I remember going through this exercise last year and being like, Atlanta Falcons are like the only running back spot. Now I have, so many good running back spots that we talked about, but like Vegas, that's a great spot. You have Alexander Madison and Zamir White, 2 people that have never showed that they could be starters.
Right.
Panthers. Bryce Young's, he's struggling right now. He's not going to struggle like he did last year. Guarantee you that. We talk about Giants, Broncos. There's so many good landing spots right now. And then moving with a wide receiver, it's the same thing. So I think this is going to be an impressive class. When people look back, I think it's going to be underrated, even with all the hype that it's getting.
Okay, cool. So here, man, I'm going to actually see if I can get something going with you. I want to see if we can create a mock draft. So let me see if you actually have access to this. So this is more of a curveball. Again, I'm going to do that just one last time. I promise you. This will be the last curveball I'll throw your way, because I do want to also be cognizant of your time, because you are a new father after all. So for all we know, Madeline could be having a crazy time right now. Just next. But here you go.
Time right now. So maybe we can make this go longer if you want, then, I guess, right? There's 2 ways to look at that.
Right. Exactly. Do I want to help you or do I want to help her? Right. So here, see if you can open this link I just sent you, and then we can go from there. This is going to be a mock draft, and this one is a 1 quarterback league. And what we'll do is I believe you can select any spot that is there available. Let me see. It says here you can invite a friend by sharing okay, so let me see. I just did that. Let me know if that works for you.
Okay. I'm sure I can do it from my phone too.
Okay, sure. And then what I can do is I'm
trying to see if I can get it on the computer.
Okay.
Real quick here.
No problem. And what I'll do in the meantime is let me go in and share my screen. And what I'll do is let me pull up the Sleeper app, see what it looks like. And okay, great. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. So we can actually do this the right way. So let me just have you go to the right instead. Let me make this a little bigger, and we are good to go.
All right, I'm in.
Okay. All right, great. So let me go ahead and go to start draft, and then
now is this a super flex?
This is a super. Oh, hold on. Looks like it's doing because I don't have a pick. Are you here at all, or what?
No, I'm not. Didn't work for me. No.
Okay, so let me see what happened here. See, we're just figuring this out for the first time, so you can tell that we did not rehearse this. So, all right, cool. So let's at least read through what we have here so far and get your reaction. So we have Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze. This is not a super flex. This is just a 1 quarterback league. And then you have Bowers going 4. Now, we did talk about how you you see the talent in Bowers, but do you agree with this CPU taking Bowers before maybe a Brian Thomas and even Caleb Williams?
I don't disagree with it. How about that?
Okay.
I think that's something, I think when you start getting into wide receiver like Brian Thomas and Brock Bowers, you could start discussing team needs at that point. If you had a deep need for tight end, I think you're going to have a good one in Brock Bowers. But if you're looking more at the long game on someone that could be just this crazy alpha for your team for a long time, you might want to go with Brian Thomas, but I don't dislike the Brock Bowers pick at all there. I think that's going to be the decision everyone's making, right? It's going to be Bowers, Brian Thomas, and it seems like I think Adonai Mitchell is going to make, a pretty big in the draft. I think it's going to surprise some people, and I think that's going to be the decision is going to be between those three.
And then you did mention Jonathan Brooks and the concerns that people may have because of the ACL injury. Do you agree with this last pick in the first round for a player like Jonathan Brooks?
I love it. I would love to get Jonathan Brooks there at 112. Now, if I don't get Jonathan Brooks there at 112, you best believe 5 weeks into the season when Jonathan Brooks still isn't really the starter yet because of his ACL injury and he's learning the offense. And, we've seen the first year back from ACL injuries, the production's down. That's what happened to Blake Corum. Blake Corum would have been his draft stock would have been greatly increased if he came out at the end of the year prior, but he came back after his ACL injury to come back and win a national title, which he did. So you can't really hate him for it. But I'll be after Team 12 trying to get Jonathan Brooks off of him for cheap because the beginning of the year is not going to be the greatest for Brooks, I wouldn't think, and maybe the whole year, quite frankly. But I don't mind that spot at all.
Right, and then we're seeing here a 3 straight running backs coming off the board. You have actually guys that you've mentioned already. Any reservations here with these?
No, Trey Benson and Blake Corum. Yeah, those are great. I like the Benson pick more than the Corum pick, just because, like we talked about, tread on the tires and age, and I just don't think that Corum can do everything that Benson can for as long as he can. But I wouldn't knock anybody for doing it. That take could look bad down the road because Corum has the production that Trey Benson doesn't, and that's always the argument, right? Analytics and production, and analytics versus production profile, and Blake Corum has the production, so I like it all.
So now that we're here at this 203 spot, we see that we have some wide receivers available that are here consensus ADP a little bit higher. So you see Ladd McConkey, guys that you mentioned, Keon Coleman, and we also have JJ McCarthy. Now, we obviously know that the depth at the quarterback position probably ends like the tier break between Caleb Williams. Obviously, is going to be different than that of Jane Downs as well as Drake May. But would you say there's a tier break between Drake May and McCarthy? Because we're seeing the hype of McCarthy really increasing over the last few weeks. How are you analyzing him, and how would you approach this pick overall too? Would you go wide receiver, or where would you go with McCarthy there at the quarterback position?
Well, first of all, to the point, again, until the actual NFL draft happens, it's a little bit tough to say, what exactly is going to happen because, for instance, remember Will Levis last year was supposed to go second overall, right? And then he dropped to the beginning of the second round, right? So there was a time. So it could be the same thing. If there's so much smoke and mirrors going on. But to answer your question, McCarthy, from a fantasy perspective, is undoubtedly a tier or two below all three of those other guys. All three of those other guys can run. You look at their fantasy points per game in college, they're all up there. They're running the ball too, and you're not getting that out of JJ McCarthy. Right. And I think the arm talent for the other three is also better. So I'm not looking at JJ McCarthy here, or probably at all in my rookie draft picks. But I do like the other three quarterbacks, but not as early as they went here.
Got it. So then in this case, you would probably lean on Ladd McConkey or even Keon Coleman with this 203.
Yeah, I'd be going Ladd McConkey for sure. I have a lot of question marks on Keon Coleman still. So
then being that, unfortunately, I didn't figure this thing out the right way, kind of like a learned lesson. I will definitely do that next time. But here, I'm going to go ahead and go with Ladd McConkey here. And then we'll see. And then, okay, so looks like we have the 204 pick as well. Are you going double wide receiver here with Keon Coleman, or are you going to start taking a little jab at the running back position? I know we see your guy here, Braylon Allen.
Yeah, I actually here I put my money where my mouth is, and I'm probably going Ricky Pearsall. Now, I don't think we need to do it. We don't necessarily need to do it now. I don't think he's going to last till 304, especially when draft season rolls around.
Yeah, right over here.
But let's see, Ladd, Xavier. Yeah, Pearsall is next on my board. I think that's 9, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that's the 9th one. So Pearsall would be my pick here.
You know, you are my guest, so I will go ahead and make that choice. So there's Ricky Pierce.
And he's going to be going a lot earlier than whatever they would be telling us on Sleeper today. Once all this all pans out.
All right, cool. So one more pick here, and I'll just kind of blitz through the other picks that we've had. So the aforementioned Keon Coleman's there. Same thing with JJ McCarthy. He's there as well. And then you see Wilson, Allen, Leggett, Wright, Penix. Then you have Sanders. And then now you're going to begin the third round with 2 straight quarterbacks. And then you have Lloyd there. What are you now doing at that final 304? Now, you did also preface earlier in the episode that these aren't necessarily what you would title premium picks. So assuming that you haven't traded away this pick and you are stuck with it, how do you approach it being that it's your last pick of your draft?
Yeah, so I'm going upside, right? And I'm going to take someone else. And again, I think this stuff kind of all pans out a little bit. I think it's going to look really early now here on 423 ahead of the draft. I think Pearsall, I think that's going to be about the range Pearsall ends up going in, this like 2.02 to 2.06 range. And we maybe could have got him in the third right now. But I have a lot of question marks on Keon Coleman and what he can actually do. I think it's really early for JJ McCarthy in a 1-quarterback league. Roman Wilson, I like that pick. I think he's right up there. Braylon Allen, we talked about, he was the young production profile. Xavier Leggett, kind of similar to Keon Coleman, but maybe not even as polished, which is kind of scary. So I have questions on him as well. Jalen Wright, obviously that's a good, we talked about him from Tennessee having a lot of upside. Jatavian Sanders, the tight end. And then we talk about Bo Nix, also 3.01. Really like that pick for Bo Nix. I think that's a great pick. Marshawn Lloyd was kind of the last the last running back I think that we had in that tier. So I'm going all upside. Give me Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton is the man that, has some character flaws, right? I mean, I think literally we watch there's a video of him losing a game and him punching a woman, pushing her in the face basically as he left the field. So don't get me wrong, there's question marks, but Georgia and Alabama, so he's playing against the top talent. I think Jermaine Burton has a real chance to be something in the NFL if he can keep his head on straight.
So got it. So we went there, and you know what's funny? In my mock drafts, I've seen a lot of Jalen Polk in this range. What's your take on him compared to in which you obviously went for at the 303 or the 304?
I really like Jalen Polk. So in my when I was in talking through sleepers with you, I had a couple people in that we talked through 1 through 3, obviously, home run, whatever I said, slam dunk and Gronk spike. Right? And then 4 through 9 we talked about, and then 10 plus is I put gems versus fool's gold. And I think the gems in this secondary portion, I think Jalen Polk was the first person I wrote. Jermaine Burton. But the reason I went Burton is because I think the upside, I think there's character concerns. I think it's going to drop his draft stock. But at 3.04, who cares? I mean, Jalen Polk is going to be a good possession receiver, probably for somebody. Don't get me wrong. He'll have some PPR love and whatnot. But I just wanted to shoot for the moon. Malik Washington, I don't think he even got drafted in that. I mean, and then Roman Wilson, who we talked about, and then Tez Walker. Those were kind of the ones that I think are really the gems on that 10 through 10 plus. And then I have, for Fool's Gold, I have Keon Coleman, Xavier Leggett, Malachi Corley is getting a ton of love as I think every year the person that runs the football well and catches passes as a wide receiver gets the Debo comp, and it's how many Debos are there really in the world? I mean, you listen to the yards after catch finishes of everyone in the NFL, and he leads the league every other year. So that's pretty incredible. There is no other Debo, and he's a frustrating person to have on your team. So I mean, already. And then Javon Baker is getting some love also, and I don't think there's much there either.
Got it. Okay, cool. So as we get ready to land this plane, cool, I do want to address some of the comments that we got. One of them comes from my good friend here, Hits Moan Corner. He says, McCarthy is talented, but still can't understand why he's gained so much steam for being selected super early in the NFL draft. Cole, you've shared some insights on this, but why exactly do you think, is this just one of those smoke and mirrors thing? Like, I know that during this time of the season, we hear it's called lying season, where everyone's just throwing something out there to kind of build some hype. But is this one of those things as well when it comes to McCarthy?
I think with JJ McCarthy, it's that you're going to get someone that between the ears is engaged in the football game, who's a competitor, who just took his team to the national title, who knows how to win, who knows how to play whatever role. I mean, we've seen in the recent years, just the Shanahan system and what that's done in the NFL, even McVay to some, these guys throw the ball, they have good stats. They're good quarterbacks. You just don't need them to do too much. And people have seen, have talent all around, and that's why it's the Vikings talk about, is he not Kirk Cousins? What did Kirk Cousins, that's the whole comp, right? And that's why Vikings are so on him, is because it's Kirk Cousins. So I don't know, how much steam does Kirk Cousins get? Yeah, it's a lot when you're talking about what he does for an offense. It's not very much when what you're talking about with fantasy, and we're talking about fantasy football here. So, I don't really think there's much on that one.
Oh, sorry about that. There you go. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I had some issues there with my
hot take. Hot take.
That was such a hot take that it shut off my camera.
Just like an old N64, just pull it. I think I'm pretty sure that works still.
Dude, I haven't heard of that in a cool minute, but can you still hear my audio? There you go. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Let me get this to fix. So here, how about this? While we're doing this, Mr. Cole, how about we now transition to the part where we go over some advice that you'd give just in general to a guy who maybe is just newly married, newly father. How do you approach that whole scenario? What are some key things that you would give someone that you learned in this new season?
Oh, man. I think, first of all, I think the thing that I learned is how much, please excuse my naivety, right? But how much my wife put into this whole thing, the carrying of the baby, the labor, all of that. And then, it's kind of your turn, your opportunity to shine once the baby's here. Right. And so just really leaning into that and just truly being there for your partner, I think is the best thing that you could possibly do. And, I think like we talked about, if faith is a part of your life, I think, living for someone besides yourself is kind of already in the corollary of what you're already doing. So adding another child, adding a child to that doesn't change, the fact that you're living unselfishly and for someone else. But I think just being as big of an asset to your wife as you can in those moments is kind of the best thing that you could possibly do. Plus, I have a feeling, we talked about liquid assets. I think that will trade well for me in the future as well, I guess. Not why I'm doing it, but I think that's very important.
Dude, yeah, so good. I think one thing I'll give as a little nugget that maybe even could bless anyone that's watching right now is one thing I've learned. I think as of I guess more recently, a few months ago. So my wife and I, we did the whole premarital counseling. We went to a pastor that helped us out with getting ready. And even then, there's so much of life that can't prepare you, even if you feel like you're the most prepared, you've gone to the right counseling, but life in itself is going to require you to ultimately make a decision. And I think the biggest decision that you can make is to, just like you said, to choose your spouse and to be the teammate. And right now that may sound really easy, but man, our flesh is such a huge enemy of any kind of thing working in the better interest of your marriage. And if you don't learn to at least choose and understand that in the beginning, when you first date your spouse, you're in this my actions are being driven by my emotion. But I learned just a quote recently saying that now as you get older and more seasoned in your marriage, it literally becomes your emotions will actually, hold on. I think I got that backwards. So the original quote was that in the beginning, your emotions drive your actions, but now your actions need to drive your emotions. So it's a whole different twist on how we just naturally approach our relationships. And I think now the intentionality piece of, I'm going choose to make a change. Yeah, we can talk about like what's getting me frustrated, but until there's a decision on me actually wanting to be better for you, that's when I think we see the true fruit, truly happen, because now we're putting ourselves to the side and we're allowing the two to actually become one. And that may take, some time. I know it's taken us a few, but I think just having that understanding of choosing goes a long way, because that at least makes those tougher seasons a little bit easier, knowing that, hey, it's still tough, but I have someone that I can rely on, that we're going to make this thing through and we're going to do it together. And I think that's the most important piece that I would give anyone, really, especially getting into a brand new season as far as fatherhood goes as well.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. And just, things can be hard, but like, so what? Like, I think people are just too focused on themselves and how they feel. Like, it just, you know what the right thing to do is in most situations. And usually it's choosing somebody else and just doing the hard things when you know that's the right thing to do. Like, that's what I think really like deciphers between people. Like, who's willing when things get hard or things they want to do something for themselves, or, who's willing to just actually just like stick their foot in the ground and say, I'm not moving. I'm doing I will do exactly what you want to do. I will not choose myself today. I think just when you do that, I think it makes life so much easier. Like we're talking about, choose your hard, right? I mean, it's going to be difficult one way or the other. It's either going to be hard and you're going to be just putting others before you, or you're going to put yourself first and you're going to end up in a place that's a lot more difficult than that.
Dude, so good. Well, Cole, thank you so much for that. Thank you for your time, as well as being able to share some of your insights as well. I had so much fun just having this conversation with you and finally making this happen. And I have a good feeling this will be the last time too, my friends. So thank you once again for being on here. And guys, I know Cole doesn't necessarily have anything out just yet publicly, but the minute that he has like a YouTube channel or Instagram or Twitter that is focused on this, we will broadcast it like crazy, because you gave us a lot of gems, man, and I do appreciate you for that.
Can you host a show if your name's featuring Cole Crockett? I mean, that doesn't. I don't really know how that would work.
That could be the title.
And I appreciate it, Ivan. That. I mean, I've been in your ear about this ever since we met fortuitously at the Fantasy Footballers, and on you love football when you're on Skid Row, walking through all the tents and all the urine on the streets to get to a fantasy football podcast. Like, and then you see like your wife teaches you, and she's like, I'm not going. And so you're there by yourself. And then you see, you rolled out, and that's like, we're friends at that point. Like, I'm getting on your podcast at some point. So I'm glad you saw the writing on the wall.
Absolutely. Well, dude, thank you so much. And guys, be sure to stay tuned. Our next episode is going to be about our wide receiver rankings, and we're actually going to react to the actual NFL draft. But Cole, I can't thank you enough, man, for this. So everyone, be sure to stay tuned for more content. And I hope you guys got value out of this video, and we will see you guys in the next one.